For decades, we've been reporting on the extreme way the Chinese regime crushes the religious freedom of its citizens. But in recent years, the CCP has been escalating its tactics against religious minorities here on American soil.
That's their mentality. They get to do around the world what they do internally, and that's what they're trying to do through this lawfare.
If the Chinese Communist Party is able to discredit those who want to discredit it, then it can use that to justify persecution that it has committed against many religious minorities, including Falun Gong.
In this episode, I'm sitting down with religious freedom lawyers Justin Butterfield and Leah Patterson to understand what's going on, including their response to a recent lawsuit against Shenyun, the performing arts company founded by Falun Gong practitioners in New York. The case touches on vital questions about what it means to be able to practice your faith and guide the education of your children in America. This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick. Justin Butterfield, Leah Patterson, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you for having us.
So I've come to deeply appreciate the U.S. Constitution, and it's no surprise to me that the First Amendment of the Constitution speaks of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, but ultimately, how I view it is it's freedom of conscience. And that, to me, I've come to believe is the fundamental human right. And I know that you share this view, but I'd like you to actually explain it to me in a deeper way today.
That's exactly right. You know, freedom of conscience is fundamental to all other rights that we enjoy as Americans. If the government can tell you how you can think, then it doesn't matter if you have freedom of speech, what you talk about, freedom to vote, how you vote, because all of those other freedoms are ultimately tied to the freedom to follow your conscience, to follow your religious convictions, to follow those deepest parts of yourself that tell you what's right and wrong.
You know, one of the reasons why both of us wanted to become part of religious liberty litigation is because of the importance of defending that right. You can't just leave it and expect it to still exist unless you defend it. You work to move it forward, to make sure that that fundamental promise that all of us as Americans have the right to follow God as we understand him, and without facing the idea that the government could declare you a heretic. That's completely antithetical to what American law is, and the benefits of religious liberty resulted in a freer and better society.
And I was shocked when I heard that the Chinese Communist Party used the actual word heresy for religious groups that they disagree with, that don't, bend the knee to the Chinese Communist Party. It's shocking when you see other governmental organizations that really are putting themselves in the place of God. They're saying, I am the ultimate arbiter of what is correct views about religion, correct views about, the ultimate things of life, the things that are foundational to everything that you are. In the United States, the government doesn't try to put itself into that place, whereas in other countries, unfortunately, they do.
I want to offer a few examples of how this Chinese Communist Party approach to dealing with heretical religions, to use the term that you just offered, like Falun Gong, manifests here, right? So the case in point example is you have people who are Chinese government agents bribing an IRS official who is actually an FBI sting operant to remove Shenyun's tax-exempt status, his 501c3 status, basically to cause them problems, to prevent them from being able to do what they are constitutionally allowed to do. This is, there's multiple examples of Chinese Christians, Uyghurs, Tibetans being harassed, being attacked, again, by proxies of the regime, whether direct, whether overt or not as overt. How does the law look at that here?
It's interesting. I had worked several years ago on a matter where some Chinese Communist Party officials were visiting Houston, and there was a route they were going to travel along, and some members of the Falun Gong were going to be protesting them on that route, and they'd booked a set of rooms at a hotel, and the Chinese Communist Party called the hotel and got the hotel to kick out all of the Falun Gong members, and basically got the hotel to do their dirty work of saying, you're not allowed to stay here because of your religious beliefs. And that's shocking to us, and that should be shocking to us, right? We have this idea that all faiths need the protection of law, have the protection of law. And I think that the Chinese Communist Party is not used to that, right? They're used to, here are the religions that we accept, and we can do whatever we want with the religions we don't agree with. And they come to America and they just presume, well, these religions are minority religions, so nobody in the United States will have a problem with our bullying them, or we'll be able to get our way. In this situation, once we notified the hotel that, hey, here are several federal laws that you may have just violated by kicking these people out of your hotel because of their religious beliefs, the hotel reversed their decision. And I think that idea that all faiths in the United States are so protected and are equally protected that we don't have favorites. We don't have the government saying, you're a good religion, you're not a good religion, you're a religion that says nice things about the government, so we're going to let you have peace, but you protest too much, so we're not going to tolerate your existence. That idea is so foreign to us. Now, unfortunately, the Chinese Communist Party, I think, has been getting wise to the idea that we can't just bully them directly through the law. So now we have to smear them in some way and do an end run around the religious liberty protections. But ultimately, as in the case that Leah and I have been working on recently, they just can't get away from trying to sue over everyday religious activities that are protected and thoroughly protected in the United States.
How is this end run attempted exactly? I mean, just more in a broad sense.
There's a lot of ways. And, what we're seeing in this kind of case is, trying to limit the definition of what religion is, what religious exercise looks like. If you narrow it in to just certain things that look a certain way, then it makes it easier to restrict, right? So that's one of the kind of the arguments that we've been seeing. For example, the idea of relegating Falun Gong to being a political movement is an example that we've seen, when that's not at all what it is. That's like saying that that the Catholic Church isn't religious because Pope John Paul II was instrumental in defeating communism in Poland. So the Catholic Church is still just as religious because the principles were opposed to communism. We can't speak to or speculate about what the individual motivations of any particular plaintiff is in bringing a lawsuit, but the effect certainly serves the purposes of religious oppression that China has been trying to accomplish. Because, if the Chinese Communist Party is able to discredit those who want to discredit it, then it can use that to, justify persecution, justify the terrible persecution that it has committed against many religious minorities, including Falun Gong. And that's why it's so important to fight for that religious liberty here, that it's not just that, other beliefs are tolerated. It's that it's a fundamental part of who we are as a nation to tolerate people who are different from ourselves, and to have value in the exchange of that. That's the beauty of America, is learning from other people and other people's beliefs and building something better out of it. But if China can use essentially smear campaigns to discredit people at home, it justifies what they do.
So we're going to take a quick break right now, and folks, we're going to be right back. And we're back with lawyers Leah Patterson and Justin Butterfield. It's kind of obvious when I say it, but I hadn't thought about it this way, that what the approach towards faith in communist China is basically antithetical to the approach to faith in the United States. And so it's particularly noxious when that approach is brought here.
In China, you have the government, and then you have your relationship with God below that. And they expect your relationship with God to be subservient to the state. In the United States, we understand that people's relationship with God is the most important thing in their life, and their relationship to the state is subservient to that relationship with God. The way China is trying to use laws in the U.S. to kind of enforce their own internal law here outside of their country, to eradicate people that they've decided to eradicate around the world. You know, it makes me think of the Chinese government's opening a police station in New York to enforce their local laws. But that's their mentality, that they get to do around the world what they do internally. And that's what they're trying to do through this lawfare. They're trying to target the same groups that they would target in China, just here in the United States. They're trying to impose their own concept of what is legal, what is right, what is orthodoxy. There's no civic orthodoxy in the United States, but they're trying to foist that idea upon us here.
You know, it also strikes me that with the police station example, right? When the police station gets put up first, it doesn't call itself a police station. It's a community center, right? And then it starts exerting influence and exerting pressure in various ways in a kind of political correctness at first. And this is your point about the pushback is so important. If there's no pushback, then it takes a little more. If there's no pushback, and it just sort of grows, and eventually you get something that's a lot closer to a police station because people said, it's just the Chinese figuring out things for themselves, you know, or something like that. You've done a lot of cases related to revoking this 501c3 status, nonprofit status, or preventing people from religious groups from getting nonprofit status. It's very interesting, actually, when I think about it, that these particular Chinese agents tried to use this method, which is the exact method that often is used by overzealous secularists or something like that, right? To try to impinge on freedom of religion of Christians, for example. That's curious.
Yes, absolutely. One of the cases that I was involved in before is, a Christian voter guide kind of organization, nonpartisan, providing information on elections, how to get registered to vote. And the IRS initially denied their 501c3 application, saying that because they had a statement of faith that was based on biblical principles, that it was too political because the Bible is Republican. Now, the IRS reversed that, thankfully. But, that idea that your religion can't inform your political views is completely wrong. And if you have the government deciding that something is too political for religion to have anything to do with, then that's the government defining what religion is and what it can mean to someone. There are people of faith across the country, probably on both sides of the aisle, whose faith informs what they vote for and what policies matter to them. And it's very crucial for the government to respect that.
And, for an idea of how wrong that is in the United States, after this came out, the IRS actually called the founder of the organization within, 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
And apologized. So
when have you heard of the IRS apologizing?
I know.
Well, so I think this is the point where we can talk about Sun v. Shenyun, which is the case that you're working on. You've just submitted this motion to dismiss. This is what brought you to my attention, and it kind of strikes me a little bit in the vein of what you were just talking about per your argument.
Essentially, it's a lawsuit filed by former Shenyun dancers. They left Shenyun in 2015, I believe, and they've brought human trafficking claims. As soon as you hear that, right, it sounds bad. It sounds scary, but ultimately, they don't make out a viable legal claim at all. And it essentially amounts to, if your parents enroll you in a religious school, and that school has rules that are consistent with the faith, such as limiting time on the internet or limiting access to pornography. That was actually one of the allegations in the complaint was complaining that the students couldn't freely access pornography. Well, of course, that's good parenting. Parents should not be allowing children to see that, and neither should a school that's responsible for them.
The complaint makes claims like, well, you gave us flip phones and not smartphones.
Right.
We weren't able to play video games. And so the average person who just reads the headline, right? Shinyun sued under federal law, fighting human trafficking, thinks, oh, there's going to be, what are they doing there? And you have to really look at the details. Oh, they limited my time on the internet. Some of the plaintiff's allegations are that, well, we have a strict schedule. We wake up early and we do our school, and then we have to practice, and then we practice our faith. We have some time set aside for spiritual development, and then we have to practice our performances more. And it's a busy, packed schedule day in and day out. But if you think about it, look at what high-level gymnasts, high-level ballet schools, so many Olympians, they homeschool for a few hours every day, and they spend the rest of the time perfecting their performance. And here, similarly, they are committed to being high-level performers. They joined these schools. They worked with Shinyun because they wanted to be high-level dancers. They wanted to be able to do these traditional Chinese dances at a very high professional level. And that requires dedication. They made that choice. And now they're complaining about the dedication that getting there requires.
And in fact, these particular plaintiffs persevered over years and multiple failed auditions because they wanted to be accepted to Feitan Academy and to ultimately be able to perform with Shinyun so badly that they persevered in seeking this level of performance. And it's pretty much what you would expect from a high performance ballet school.
Really, fundamentally, the things that they are complaining about and calling human trafficking are volunteering for your religious organization, attending a religious boarding school, things that happen in hundreds of thousands of religious communities all across the United States every day. I think if you told churches that having a missions trip, having the church youth group go and build a house for a poor person might get you sued under a human trafficking statute, I think they would be shocked.
Right, but that's a great example. Yeah. That's exactly the kind of thing which
it's exactly analogous, the sort of thing that Shinyun is being accused of. It shouldn't be controversial, but when you stamp that label on it, suddenly it sounds much more controversial than it is. Even though people volunteer at their churches all over the United States every day in this country, and we don't see lawsuits against them. Unfortunately, that is the sort of thing that's a threat from this lawsuit.
And you look at the complaint against Shinyun, and if you were to replace all of the word Falun Gong with the word Christian or Catholic, it would be completely unremarkable, the activities that they're complaining about. It would, you expect a Catholic boarding school to follow Catholic doctrine and to require a code of conduct that's consistent with that. But, that's one of the reasons why it's so important to protect religious liberty for everyone is that the burden falls hardest on religious minorities whose faith is less understood by the majority of people and, even potentially less understood by the court. That's why the government can't require religion to look a certain way or to have certain principles or have certain rituals, for example, because those protections are the most crucial for people whose religion is less understood.
I found myself a few days ago in the home of Montpellier, the home of James Madison, at the desk where he wrote many parts of what became the Constitution at some point. And I was thinking to myself about Federalist 10. This was very instructive to me that in America there's this. I had never thought about the idea even of the tyranny of the majority. And it's actually a difficult issue to deal with in democracies, right? That you could have one group that imposes its will, and it's the majority, so it's a democracy. Isn't that fair? Isn't that reasonable? Well, no. In Republican democracy, there's you try to actually prevent that from happening and give the minorities their opportunity. It's just a beautiful thing that, again, I think many of us haven't really had don't realize how there isn't a perfect solution to it, but there's kind of the best trade-off, I guess, that we're aware of is what's found in the U.S. Constitution.
What's that old joke about, a democracy is 10 wolves and a sheep? A republic is 10 wolves and a sheep voting about what to do, but the sheep is heavily armed. The goal of the Constitution is to give that legal arms to the minority, to make sure that everybody's rights are respected, and that, we don't have 10 wolves voting on what to do with the one sheep.
The legal protections mean the most for those who don't have the democratic wherewithal to protect themselves.
And, you see this claim a lot come up, right? Like, well, speech should be free as long as you're not saying anything too controversial, too harmful. But what is controversial speech? What is harmful speech? It's speech the majority doesn't agree with. Those are the places where the protections for free speech are most important. It's not the ideas that everybody agrees with. It's not the beliefs that everybody hold. It's not the things that everybody does that needs protection. Those you don't have to worry about those. It's the controversial ideas. It's the ideas that are held by a few people. It's the speech that the majority views as dangerous. Those are what need the protection, because those are the ones that are going to be attacked by the majority.
You have to ask who decides what's harmful, in terms of speech.
Well, right. And I mean, and again, it's not this First Amendment, right? It's speech and conscience and faith. They're all tied so deeply together, and the ability to exercise it in a public way, right? I guess all those things are so deeply tied together. Well, this has been an absolutely fascinating discussion at so many levels. A final thought, perhaps, from each of you as we finish up?
Absolutely. Well, we're just so delighted to be with you and have the opportunity to discuss all of these things. It's why we do what we do, to protect religious liberty for everyone. And we'll see what the court does in this particular case, and we're excited to see what the future holds.
Absolutely. It's everybody, as I'd said earlier, everybody needs protection. The protections in the First Amendment are really only protections when they're protections of the people who are less understood, who are not the majority, not the dominant group in America. And Falun Gong is the beneficiary of that there are strong religious liberty protections for them, that if you take the claims in this complaint and you just put any other religion, everybody that reads it would think, oh, this is just the normal things that people all across America do. But here, the Chinese Communist Party's ideas are getting out there that, well, when the Falun Gong does it, something's wrong with it. And we just want to show that all religious groups in America need to be treated equally, that the protections that our Constitution provides applies to everybody in this country, regardless of whether, 90% of the people in the country hold to your belief or 5% of the people in the country hold to your belief. You still have that same constitutional protection of your beliefs.
Well, Justin Butterfield and Leah Patterson, such a pleasure to have had you on.
Well, thank you for having it.
It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you all for joining Justin Butterfield, Leah Patterson, and me on this episode of American Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Jan Jekielek.